My sister forged my signature to sell my house and buy herself a mansion. When I found out, she smirked. I deserve it more. You're just a single loser. My parents nodded in agreement. I said nothing but made one phone call. On her housewarming party, the Swat team arrived. She screamed, "This can't be happening." I used to believe that family betrayal only happened in movies. You know, the kind where the villain smiles sweetly while stabbing you in the back? I never imagined that villain would be my own sister, someone who grew up in the same room, shared the same meals, and swore we'd always have each other's backs. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, a registered nurse in a small hospital in Portland. I've always lived a simple, honest life. I work 12-hour shifts, take care of patients who remind me daily that kindness still matters, and I go home to a house that I bought with my own hands, the one thing in my life that truly felt mine, at least until Vanessa decided she deserved it more. Vanessa Carter, my younger sister, has always been beautiful, ambitious, and dangerously charming, the kind of person who can convince anyone of anything with just a tilt of her head and a fake smile. She works in luxury sales, as she calls it, but in truth, she's spent most of her adult life chasing easy money and rich attention. She's married to Derek, a loud, flashy realtor who measures success by how many champagne bottles he pops on weekends. Together, they were the golden couple, always posting about hustle and manifesting wealth, while I quietly paid my mortgage and brought leftovers from the hospital cafeteria. And yet, when the betrayal came, it wasn't a shock. It was a slow burn I had ignored for years. It started one crisp Tuesday morning. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through my emails before work, when I saw something odd, a mortgage release notice. It said the loan on my house had been paid off in full, except I hadn't paid it off. Not even close. I called the bank immediately. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice trembling. The man on the other end paused, clicking through his screen. "Actually, Miss Carter, we have the property transfer documents right here. It looks like you sold the house last month." My stomach dropped. "Sold? To who?" "To Vanessa and Derek Moore," he replied matter-of-factly. For a moment, the world went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I told him there must be a misunderstanding, that I never signed any documents. But when he emailed me a copy, my knees nearly gave out. My name, my signature, scrawled across the page in black ink. Perfect. Identical. Except it wasn't mine. I sat there, staring at my forged signature, my coffee turning cold, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was anger. But when anger burned out, only heartbreak remained. Because this wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal written in cursive, signed by my own blood. Still, I needed to hear it from her. I drove straight to my parents' house, my pulse racing the entire way. Vanessa's car, a sleek white BMW, was parked out front. She opened the door before I even knocked, smiling as if she'd been expecting me. "Oh, hey, sis," she said casually, leaning on the doorframe. "You look tense." "Vanessa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You sold my house." Her smile widened. "Correction. I transferred your house. Big difference. And honestly, Em, you weren't using it properly. You live alone. No kids, no family. It was time someone made real use of it." "You forged my signature," I snapped. "That's a felony." She crossed her arms, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Relax. You're always so dramatic. Think of it as redistribution. I'm married now. We need space." "You don't." Behind her, I saw Mom and Dad standing in the hallway. I looked at them for support, expecting shock, anger, anything. But instead, Mom sighed and said, "Emily, you've always been too emotional about money. Vanessa just made a smart move. Let it go." Dad nodded quietly, avoiding my eyes. "Your sister's building a future, sweetheart. Don't stand in her way." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice low and cruel. "Face it, Emily. You're just a single loser with a decent paycheck. I deserve more, and now I have it." I looked at her, my sister, my parents, the family I had defended for years, and felt something inside me finally break. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just nodded slowly and whispered, "You're right, Vanessa. You deserve it." She smirked, clearly satisfied, thinking she had won. She didn't notice the way I stared at her hands, the hands that had signed away my life. What she didn't know was that by staying silent, I wasn't surrendering. I was planning. And while she was busy decorating her new mansion, I was making one quiet phone call, the kind that brings justice to your doorstep. When the Swat team arrived at her housewarming party months later and she screamed, "This can't be happening," that was the first time in years that I finally felt at peace. Because some betrayals don't need revenge shouted. They need justice served. She said I didn't deserve a home because I was single. My silence became her downfall. People think betrayal begins with a single act, a lie, a theft, a signature. But in my case, it began years earlier, hidden inside small moments I kept forgiving. Growing up, my sister Vanessa and I were opposites, who somehow shared the same roof. I was the quiet one, always studying, helping Mom in the kitchen, patching up scraped knees or mending broken toys. Vanessa, on the other hand, was the kind of girl who turned every head the moment she walked into a room, confident, charming, manipulative. Though I didn't want to see that part back then. Our parents, Linda and Robert Carter, adored her confidence. "You could learn a thing or two from your sister," Mom used to say when I brought home A's, but no attitude. "Emily, you're too soft," Dad would add. "The world belongs to people who take what they want." And Vanessa took attention, praise, opportunities. She knew how to make herself the center of every conversation. When I got my nursing degree, she congratulated me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's nice," she said. "But don't you ever get tired of being ordinary?" I didn't mind being ordinary. My life was simple, but it was mine. After years of saving from double shifts, I finally bought a small 2-bedroom home on the edge of Portland. It wasn't much. Creaky floors, an overgrown garden, walls that needed paint. But every inch of it smelled like independence. No one could take it from me, at least that's what I thought. Vanessa visited once. She walked through the living room, her heels echoing on the wooden floor, her expression unreadable. "It's cute," she said finally. "Kind of small, but cozy. Feels like a starter home." "It's enough for me," I replied. "Yeah," she smirked, "because you don't have a family." I laughed it off then, but her words lingered. To her, being single was failure. To me, it was freedom. Vanessa's life, meanwhile, looked perfect. On Instagram, at least, photos of champagne brunches, tropical vacations, and designer handbags filled her feed. Her husband Derek was just as flashy, always calling himself a top-tier realtor, even though most of his work was selling mid-range homes. Together, they were a brand. The Moores, Portland's power couple. Our parents adored it. "Did you see Vanessa's new house?" Mom gushed one night over dinner. 3 floors, a walk-in closet bigger than our old garage. "They're really going places," Dad added. "Emily, you should ask Derek for advice on investments." I smiled politely while eating my soup, pretending their words didn't sting. I didn't need a mansion. I just wanted peace. But peace never lasts long in a family addicted to appearances. When Vanessa's business hit a rough patch, a bad investment, a few missed mortgage payments, she started showing up at my place more often. She'd sit on my couch, wine glass in hand, sighing dramatically. "You're lucky, Em," she'd say. "No stress, no husband, no kids. Just work and come home. Must be nice." Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at the deed folder on my shelf, the one that held all my house documents. I thought nothing of it. She was my sister, family. Then came the weekend barbecue at my parents' house. Vanessa pulled into the driveway in a rental car, her usual confidence replaced with quiet panic. "We had to downsize," she said lightly. "Just temporary. Derek's working on something big." Mom nodded sympathetically, but I saw it, the fear behind Vanessa's perfect makeup. I should have known that desperation can turn anyone dangerous. That night, while everyone laughed and toasted marshmallows, Vanessa leaned closer to me. "You know, Em," she said softly, "if you ever decide to sell your place, I'd buy it in a heartbeat." "Why?" I asked. "Because it's got good bones, and because you'd probably sell it cheap." She smiled when she said it, but her eyes were calculating. I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. A month later, I'd learned she wasn't. My house, the only place that ever felt safe, became her trophy. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. She'd taken something built with every drop of sweat I had shed, and the worst part, my parents' approval made it feel like I was the intruder in my own life. That night, I sat on my porch, now technically hers, and whispered to myself, if they think I'm weak, they'll see what silence can do. Because while Vanessa and Derek were busy decorating chandeliers and marble kitchens, I was collecting something much more valuable. Proof. They thought they'd stolen my home. But what they didn't know was that I'd just begun building my case, brick by brick, lie by lie. And soon every light in her mansion would flicker blue and red. The day I lost everything didn't start with thunder or tears. It started with a letter. It came in a plain white envelope. No warning, no reason to expect anything unusual. But inside was a notice congratulating me on the successful transfer of property. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process it. My house? Transferred? To whom? I reread every word as if I'd misunderstood, but the message stayed the same. According to the system, I had sold my home, my one safe place, and signed the documents myself. Except I hadn't. I rushed to the bank, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the papers. The man behind the counter was polite but detached, clicking through his screen like it was any other transaction. When he turned the monitor toward me, there it was. My signature, my handwriting, my name. Perfectly forged. My knees nearly gave out. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. That house had been the result of years of night shifts, lonely dinners, and saving every spare dollar. It wasn't just walls and paint. It was my proof that I'd made it on my own. And now, it was gone. When I finally got the address of the new owners, I drove there in disbelief. I still remember turning onto that wide street, manicured lawns, iron gates, everything screaming luxury. And then right at the end stood a brand new mansion. My stomach twisted. I parked across the street and just sat there, watching. Movers carried in boxes. Laughter echoed from inside. Music played faintly from the open doors. People were celebrating my loss. I stepped out, clutching the letter in my hand, and walked up the driveway. The woman at the door looked radiant, her hair perfectly done, a glass of champagne in one hand. She smiled like nothing was wrong. "Beautiful house, isn't it?" she said casually. I stared at her. "You took it." She tilted her head slightly. "Don't be so harsh. You weren't using it properly. Besides, you're fine. Single, independent, no family to fill those rooms. It was just sitting there." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt something deep inside me break, not like glass shattering, but like fabric tearing slowly apart. "And the signature?" I managed to ask. Her smirk barely faltered. "Details," she said softly. "Let it go. You'll survive." When I turned around, my parents were standing nearby. I thought they'd defend me, demand answers. Instead, my mother sighed and said, "Sweetheart, your sister's building a family. She needed more space. Don't make a scene." My father nodded quietly, his arms folded, eyes full of disappointment. Not for what had been done to me, but for daring to protest it. I remember walking away in silence, holding the paper so tightly it wrinkled in my palm. The sound of laughter followed me down the driveway like a cruel echo. That night, I sat in my car outside the empty apartment I'd just rented, staring at the wall for hours. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. There was just this strange calm, the kind that comes when something inside you finally dies, and something else starts to wake up. They thought silence meant surrender, but silence can be strategy. The next morning, I opened a notebook and wrote down 3 words: prove, don't plead. From that moment, everything changed. I went to work like normal, smiled at patients, nodded at neighbors, but every free hour was spent tracing documents, calling offices, searching archives. I learned how property records worked, how to request signature verification, how to dig quietly without leaving a trace. And slowly, piece by piece, I found what I needed. The signature on the transfer form was flawless, but not flawless enough. The pressure on the ink was wrong, the slant of the last letter too sharp. Someone had imitated me, not perfectly, but confidently. Then came the real discovery. A second mortgage had been placed against the same property. using my old financial records as collateral. That wasn't just forgery, that was a federal crime. I printed everything, built a folder thicker than any case file I'd ever seen. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not the person who took it, not even friends. They'd all say the same thing: let it go. But letting go was never the plan. I didn't need revenge that shouted. I needed justice that arrived. The world around me went on. Family dinners, holidays, fake smiles. And I stayed invisible, pretending to move on. But every time she posted a photo of that mansion online, showing her dream home, I saved it. Every caption bragging about success became another piece of evidence. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. And patience, when sharpened enough, becomes a weapon. When the moment came, when the housewarming invitations went out, golden cards with embossed letters, I didn't hesitate. I smiled, accepted politely, and made a single call. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. Just one calm voice saying, "She'll be home that night." After that day, I stopped asking why. There's a kind of clarity that comes after losing everything, when your mind, stripped of noise, starts thinking like a blade. I woke up before dawn, made coffee in silence, and opened the notebook that had become my anchor. Each page was a record of what they'd done: photocopies, notes, small discoveries scribbled in the margins. Every line of ink felt like a heartbeat reminding me, you're not powerless, you're patient. On the outside, I lived like nothing happened. I went to work, smiled when spoken to, said I'm fine to everyone who asked. People believed it, they always do. The world doesn't notice quiet people until they start moving with purpose. In the evenings, I researched laws, real estate transfers, banking loopholes. I learned what words prosecutors used in fraud cases: unauthorized signing, intent to deceive, personal gain from falsified documentation. Each phrase was like a stepping stone leading towards something solid, truth with consequences. One night, while reviewing papers under a dim lamp, I realized there was a pattern, a trail of forged signatures not just on my deed but on several related forms. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a chain, a system. That's when I stopped being a victim and started being a witness. I made an appointment with someone I'd only spoken to once, a detective who specialized in financial crimes. His voice had been calm, factual. "Bring everything," he'd said. So I did. A brown envelope packed with every piece of proof I'd collected, labeled neatly with sticky notes. He took his time reading through it all, his brow furrowed once, then again. When he finally looked up, his tone shifted. "If this is authentic, it's more than just fraud. It's criminal possession of stolen property, false representation, and mortgage manipulation. You understand what that means?" I nodded. "I understand exactly." He leaned back, tapping a pen against the file. "Then we'll need to move carefully. We'll build a case quietly. No confrontation, no warning. When she officially hosts something under that address, we can act. We'll need her inside the property and in clear possession." A strange calm washed over me. The moment had a gravity I hadn't felt in months, like exhaling after holding your breath underwater. "That won't be a problem," I said. "She's planning a party soon." The following weeks passed like a countdown. Online, the photos kept coming. Marble staircases, new chandeliers, gold-trimmed invitations stamped with "housewarming celebration." Every image was another confession. I stayed quiet. Didn't react, didn't comment, just watched. Every evening, I checked in with the detectives' team, providing updated details. They moved fast but cautiously, verifying documents, preparing warrants, mapping timing. I admired their precision. It mirrored my own. At night, I practiced my composure in the mirror. Steady eyes, relaxed voice, nothing that could hint at satisfaction. She would expect anger, not serenity. The invitation arrived a week later, embossed in silver and gold as if arrogance had a texture. "To celebrate new beginnings," it read. New beginnings. That phrase almost made me laugh. On the morning of the event, I woke before the sun. The world outside was quiet. That rare hour when even the wind holds its breath. I made tea instead of coffee. I wanted clarity, not adrenaline. Dressing was almost ceremonial. A plain dress, modest jewelry, clean lines, nothing loud. I wanted to look like someone attending closure, not conflict. Before leaving, I opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote, "Some storms don't roar. They whisper." Then I tore that page out and slipped it into my purse. The mansion glowed like a glass lantern when I arrived. Cars lined the driveway, laughter floated into the night air, and lights shimmered from every window. Music, champagne, polite laughter, the sound of false perfection. She noticed me instantly, her smile dazzling and smug. "Look who decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with charm. "See? I told everyone we'd move past the drama." I smiled softly. "You were right. I'm past it." Inside, I drifted through the crowd. Strangers sipping cocktails, the faint scent of expensive perfume, the hum of success bought with lies. Every step I took felt lighter, because I already knew how the night would end. My phone vibrated once, a single message, "In position." The detectives' team was outside. Timing was everything now. I glanced toward the woman who'd taken everything from me, surrounded by guests, laughing too loudly, playing her role flawlessly. For a brief moment I felt pity. Then I remembered the bank notice, the forged ink, my parents' silence. The pity disappeared. I raised my glass and caught her eye across the room. She smiled confidently, unaware. "Congratulations," I said softly, though she couldn't hear me. "You built your dream house. Now let's see if it can stand." And as the laughter swelled, faint sirens began to grow louder in the distance, carried on the night air, getting closer. I didn't turn toward the sound. I didn't have to. I just set my glass down, folded my hands calmly, and waited for the truth to walk through her front door. The air inside the mansion shimmered with heat and perfume. Crystal lights threw reflections across polished marble. Laughter swelled and fell like waves, and for a moment it almost felt like a dream. The kind of dream that hides teeth. Everyone held glasses high. Someone tapped a spoon against a flute of champagne. "To new beginnings," a voice shouted. Applause followed. Cameras flashed. She stood at the center of it all, radiant, alive, untouchable, the queen of stolen walls. And I stood quietly near the window, the same way I always had, unnoticed, calm, invisible, the one they underestimated. Outside, through the sheer curtains, faint lights began to flicker in the distance. At first, I thought they were reflections. Then came the low hum of engines. Then the first sound that sliced through the music, the sharp bark of a command through a loudspeaker. Conversation stumbled. The band stopped playing. Guests exchanged confused looks, murmuring softly. The sound grew louder. Sirens, urgent, deliberate, echoing down the driveway. I could see it happen before it actually did. The front gates opened wide. Shadows moved fast. Uniforms, flashlights, the disciplined rhythm of people who don't knock. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "What's going on?" She turned her head, still smiling at first, expecting photographers or maybe an uninvited friend. But when she saw the flashing red and blue lights, her face froze mid-expression. The practiced charm drained, replaced by disbelief. The doors swung open. A voice thundered, "Police! Everyone stay where you are!" The music died completely. Glasses clinked onto tables. People stumbled backward. The air seemed to collapse in on itself. An officer stepped forward holding a folded document. "We have a warrant for arrest and property seizure under federal fraud investigation." It felt like time slowed. She blinked rapidly, her lipstick perfect smile breaking apart. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "This is ridiculous. I own this house." The officer's reply was crisp. "Ma'am, you acquired this property through falsified documents and forged authorization. You are under arrest." Guests began whispering, first in confusion, then in disbelief. Someone filmed. Someone gasped. Her husband tried to step forward, voice cracking. "You can't just walk in here. We paid for everything." The officer cut him off. "Sir, you're listed as a participant in the secondary mortgage fraud. Please step aside." That was when she looked for me. Her eyes swept across the room until they found mine. There it was, the flicker of realization. The memory of every time I'd stayed silent, every moment she thought I'd accepted defeat. "You?" she whispered. "You did this." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I simply held her gaze, steady and unflinching, while the officers read her rights. The clatter of handcuffs clicked like punctuation marks on a long overdue sentence. "This can't be happening," she screamed as they turned her around. "You can't do this to me. Tell them. Tell them I didn't." Her voice cracked mid-plea. The crowd that once admired her now watched in silence, faces pale, unsure whether to stay or leave. I finally spoke, my tone calm and almost gentle. "You told me to let it go," I said softly. "So I did, straight to the authorities." For a second, she stopped struggling, as if the words themselves struck harder than the cuffs. When they led her toward the door, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the marble floor. Broken glamour, panic, disbelief. The sound of her heels on stone echoed like fading applause. The officers moved with precision, escorting her out under the heavy silence of 100 stunned guests. The night air rushed in through the open doors, cold and sharp, carrying the last remnants of perfume and pride. Outside, the sirens flashed against the white walls of her mansion, blue, red, painting the perfect irony across everything she'd stolen. I stayed until the last cruiser rolled away, then stepped out into the driveway. The guests had scattered. The music equipment sat abandoned, champagne still bubbling over untouched glasses. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath. The air smelled different. Clean, like rain before dawn. Someone from the investigative team walked over quietly. "It's done," he said. "You did well." I nodded. "No," I replied. "She did this to herself. I just stopped pretending not to see it." As they finished their work, I looked up at the mansion. Glittering lights still burning behind the windows. It didn't look like triumph anymore. It looked like a confession made of concrete and glass. I turned away and started walking down the long driveway toward the dark road beyond. Behind me, the sirens faded, replaced by the rhythmic chirping of crickets. With every step, the weight on my chest lifted. The house she built with deceit would now belong to justice. And I, the quiet one, finally owned something greater than any property: peace. The next morning, the world looked ordinary again. Sunlight crept across my apartment floor, catching on the dust motes floating in the air. For a moment, I just stood there, holding my mug of coffee, trying to process the stillness. No noise, no tension, no pretending. It was over. The night before had ended like a storm, loud, fast, final. By the time I left that mansion, the police had cleared most of the guests, sealed the property, and driven away with her and the man she'd built it all with. I didn't watch the news that night. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough. What struck me the most wasn't the sound of sirens or the flash of lights. It was the silence that followed, the kind of silence that only comes when lies collapse under their own weight. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the same notebook that had carried me through everything. The last page was blank, waiting. My hands didn't shake this time. I wrote one simple line: "Justice doesn't shout, it arrives." Then I closed it and felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace without guilt. Now the following days were strange. People who had once ignored me started calling. Neighbors, relatives, coworkers, all wanting to know the real story. Some offered sympathy, others wanted gossip. I said the same thing to everyone. The truth always finds its way. That's all that matters. Even my parents eventually reached out. They came to my apartment unannounced one evening. My mother looked smaller somehow, her voice softer. My father stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. "We didn't know she'd go that far," my mother whispered. "We thought it was just a misunderstanding." I studied her face, the same one that once looked at me with pride, then with doubt, and finally with silence. "You didn't need to know everything," I said. "You just needed to see me." She started to cry, and for a second, I almost reached for her hand. But something inside stopped me. Not anger, just understanding. Some bonds break so quietly you don't notice until they're gone. They left soon after. I closed the door gently behind them, not out of bitterness, but finality. I had spent enough of my life being the quiet one everyone took for granted. That version of me was gone. The investigation made headlines for a few days. Local news segments, online articles about real estate fraud, a few viral posts about justice served. People debated it like a story rather than a life. Some called it inspiring. Others said it was too harsh. But I didn't care for either version. I knew the truth behind the headlines, the nights of planning, the years of endurance, the cost of staying silent until it mattered. When the case closed months later, the verdict was simple. The property and assets were seized, debts repaid, and restitution ordered. The house that was once mine, and then hers, became evidence of what greed does when it meets patience. I didn't move back in. I didn't want it anymore. A place touched by betrayal rarely feels like home again. Instead, I used the settlement money to buy a small cottage near the edge of town. Quiet, surrounded by trees, sunlight filtering through every window. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and listen to the wind move through the branches. It's the same kind of silence that once haunted me. Now it feels like an old friend. I've learned that revenge isn't about noise or spectacle. It's about balance, setting things right without losing yourself in the process. People often say I must have felt satisfaction watching everything fall apart, but that's not the word. Satisfaction fades. What stays is something deeper. A quiet validation that truth, when left to do its work, never misses its mark. I still think about them sometimes, not with hatred, just a strange kind of gratitude. They taught me what silence can do when you stop using it to hide. I'm not the person I was, the one who stayed quiet to keep peace, who forgave too easily, who mistook patience for weakness. I still believe in kindness, but now I know the difference between being gentle and being silent. As the last light of the day falls across the garden, I close my eyes and breathe. Somewhere, far away, the world continues. Loud, restless, unseeing. But here in this small place I rebuilt with my own hands, everything is still. And in that stillness, I finally understand. You don't always need to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes, the loudest sound in the world is the echo of a truth finally delivered. When truth finally speaks, it doesn't always need a crowd. It just needs courage. Some people call it revenge. I call it reclaiming what was mine without losing who I am. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought you'd stay silent, remember, patience isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the sharpest justice there is. If you felt that, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you would have done in her place. Forgive, or let justice speak for itself? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Stories of strength, betrayal, and the kind of truth that changes everything. Because here, every story finds its voice.